What's going on, everybody? Chump Change XD here. Hope you're all staying healthy and having a great day. In this video, we're going to be building a brand new CPU mining rig. This is going to be a noob's guide. This is also going to be my very first CPU mining rig that I have ever built. So if I make mistakes, if I'm doing something wrong, please let me know down in the description below. But I have built computers. It's not too difficult. I just need to put all these parts into it, and then setting it up inside HiveOS is what is going to be difficult because, again, I've never done it before. So first things first, as I explained in my last video going over the walkthrough, this right here is a Ryzen 5 2600, I believe, and this cooler I bought aftermarket. That is the one that comes with the Ryzen 9 or the Ryzen 7. So I'm going to remove this because we're going to be putting a water block on the CPUs. It's this Aura Airflow. To be honest, this thing was $63, totally a steal off Amazon. I ended up ordering 4 of them just in case one of them ends up crapping the bed. I'm definitely going to be using 3 of them. I got a Ryzen 9 3900X for $300 off of Craigslist. The guy actually had 2 of them, so I got them $300 a piece. I still need to purchase one more. EVGA 450BR is going to be the power supply of choice. The reason I got that, super cheap, $29 on Amazon before taxes. And like I said, I'm not going to be putting GPUs on this, so I don't need a crazy amount of watts. 450 watts is going to be plenty for what I need because I can't see this thing going over 250 watts CPU mining. As far as I know, doing research. If you guys don't know, if you have a high power limit on your PSU and you're only drawing low watts, it's not as efficient as using a smaller power supply and drawing like half of the wattage. It's more efficient that way. Don't ask me why. I'm not an engineer or an electrician, but that is the truth. So we're going to be using that 450 watt bronze power supply. This right here is a set of 16 gigabyte 3600 megahertz DDR4 RAM. This stuff I got on Amazon as well, and that was a really good deal. So we're going to be throwing 2 sticks in here. I heard anything over 3200 megahertz is the best for CPU mining. Could be wrong. Like I said, I have no idea. This is my first journey CPU mining. So let's get into it. First thing I need to do is let's rip off this cooler. Gotta flip this bracket right here. Alright, so I need to go get some alcohol so I can clean this off, and I can clean the fan off over there, and then we will remove the CPU, we will remove the RAM, and basically get this a bare bones board so we can open up the new Ryzen 9. Give me 1 second. Alright, so we're just going to need some rubbing alcohol basically just to clean off the CPU there. So we're going to open that up, put a little bit on a rag. And then basically just wipe away the paste. In small circular motions. It's the best way I've found to do it. Once I get most of it off, I like to change spots on the rag and actually clean the edges real good, get all the excess stuff off. Alright, so that's that. Alright, so the CPU is clean now. I'm just going to take it out. By lifting this rod, you push it to the side, you lift it straight up. It unclicks the pins. And then I am going to pull this out. Alright, so now that the CPU is out of the socket, I just laid it face down right there so the pins are facing up at us. We're going to take out this RAM because we're going to be using the new stuff that's over there. Beautiful. Alright, so we don't need the stock cooler that's in this box, so I'm just going to leave it. The only thing we need is this. So for those of you that don't know, on these Ryzen CPUs, and on any CPU really, bottom left corner has a little mark on it. And on the socket of the motherboard itself, you can see there's like a little thicker corner in one side on this motherboard. So that's where that dot goes. You want to make sure not to touch the pins when you're putting this in. And you want to make sure this right here is in the upright position. Alright, so once it's in place, right where it needs to be, basically just push this tab down. You're going to push it to the side and under. So it's kind of, you know, it can't be lifted up without being pushed to the side. I forgot to mention, these right here are part of the CPU cooler. So we may have to remove these when we go to use the water block that we're going to put on this. Alright, so now we are going to open up this $63 water cooler that we got on Amazon for the CPU. I will leave a link in the description below to this in case you guys are interested in it. Alright, so this is everything that's in the box. We have the radiator. It comes with a set of fans that you need to mount on the radiator. It also comes with the cooler that goes on the CPU, obviously. And then I assume this is the mounts for the motherboard, hardware. So just giving this a quick once over, this is totally worth the $63 that we paid for it. So that's awesome. Alright, now what I need to do is basically build this all up, and then I will show you it all built, and then we will install it onto the actual motherboard. So give me a second, you'll see this all built up. Alright, so she's all built up for the most part. As you can see, I put the fans on it, onto the radiator, and the cooler right here. This sticker's still on here. Obviously you have to remove that before you install it. But this bracket right here, they give you two. So this one here, and there's one right there. As you can see, it's a little bigger. That one's for an Intel motherboard. This one's for a Ryzen or an AMD. So this is the one we're going to use. That's why I locked it on there. It literally just clicks on, goes into the grooves and twists to lock in place. So now on the underside of the motherboard, this right here gets mounted and basically screws this straight through to mount the cooler. Obviously adding thermal paste and all that. So I do have to take off the other brackets right here, the brackets that are on each side of the Ryzen CPU. So I'm going to unscrew those and get this all prepped. If I flip the board over, you can see the current bracket that is there now holding it together. Okay, you can see the 4 standoffs right there around the CPU. If I flip the board over, now you can see the bracket that's on there. There's a couple bolts that go through. Then there's a washer and the hex head like coupling, more or less, to screw all the way down. So it basically acts as a standoff to go over the bolt to leave space between the top of the CPU and the bottom of the cooler. So the thickness of this and the CPU, it basically allows it to just tighten down just enough. So now what we're going to do is we need to use some of this MX4 thermal compound, and we are going to basically cover the top of the CPU so it gets even coverage to keep it cool. So typically what I do is usually just put a small pea-sized dot right here. But I've seen in a couple videos where a lot of people are actually spreading this out. So I guess what I'll do, because we're CPU mining, we are going to make sure that there is a nice even coat across the entire top of the CPU, because we need this thing to stay nice and cool. Alright, so how does that look? Literally just painted a nice thin layer on the top so it makes even connection across the entire cooler. Always wipe off your little stick here, because I'm telling you, this stuff doesn't come off. So I usually use the rag that has the alcohol on it still to clean my hands or whatever. Because once you get this on the black part of anything, it is going to stain and look like crap. Alright, so now we're going to do the peel on the warning label. As you can see, nice flat plate to mount on. And prior to mounting the fans and putting on this ring on the cooler here, I actually put it where I wanted it so this wouldn't have a hard time to sit over on the right side of the actual motherboard. So keep that in mind when you guys are actually doing this. You gotta know where you want to put the radiator. These 4 screw tips, you basically want to just get them all hand tight. Alright, and then basically you just want to tighten them in a crisscross pattern. So I'll tighten this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. No different than tightening a tire on your car. Just so everything gets tight, nice and even. But these actually do bottom out at a certain point, so you can just kind of crank them until it stops. Alright, so now that that part's done, we got to put the 2 sticks of RAM in. We have the 16 gigabyte, 3600 megahertz. So right here on the motherboard, or most motherboards, have the slots that you should use. So basically, if you could see, not the first one, but the second one, right here, there's a star next to it. It skips the third one, and then the fourth one, there's also a star next to it. So those are the 2 slots that you need to use first if you're only putting 2 sticks of RAM in. So this one right here and this one right here are the 2 we're going to use. Then you need to make sure you hold the RAM the right way, lining up this slot right here. And get it in right there. Push until you hear it click. On both sides. Same thing. Put it in the groove, push the right side, click, left side, click, and lock, as you saw. Perfect. So what do you guys think? Actually looks pretty sick, not gonna lie. So, I don't know if I'm gonna keep it standing up like that. I might twist it down, but I gotta figure out a way to mount it. For now, I put HiveOS on this USB, and that is in the USB slot. I will eventually put one of these SSDs from GPUrisers.com, and I'll probably mount it somehow right here or whatever. I mean, this isn't gonna stay in this location anyways. So now what we have to do is open up this 450 bronze PSU by EVGA, see what she looks like. Let's get her all hooked up and we'll go from there. One last thing I want to say real quick just before I open that up. All of these AIOs or water blocks, whatever you want to call them, the wires are all different, so please follow the instructions. The pump on the actual CPU is plugged into the main CPU fan right here, and the secondary one is plugged into the other 2 fans, and then all the RGB is plugged together with the arrows facing each other. It's pretty self-explanatory. When you see the plugs, just put them together with the arrows pointing at each other and you're good to go. If you do it the other way, you could blow the LEDs, so just keep that in mind. Alright, let's open this up, see what she looks like, and then we will fire this thing up and make sure she works. Not gonna lie, this is the first time I've ever purchased a PSU that has the cables all attached. I typically don't like this style, but for $29 on Amazon, I honestly could not beat it, especially for this application. This thing's so small. That's funny. EVGA 450 BR. So again, like I said, all the cables are built into it. You cannot remove them. So we have everything we need. Basically just a motherboard cable. We have a CPU cable somewhere here. This one, I believe. Yep. And we have the SATAs, Molex. You literally have like 1 or 2 of everything. You might have just a few. So it'll be like 1 cable and it'll be split 3 times like it is. So the SATA, you actually have 2 SATA strands. You have 1 Molex strand. You have 1 CPU strand. You have a PCIe that has a split to it. So you have 2 8-pins and a 24-pin. So pretty simple. Now let's plug this all in to the motherboard and then we'll get her fired up. Alright, she's all plugged in. So we have the CPU cable plugged in here. We have the motherboard plugged in there. We have this SATA plugged in for the RGB on the actual board itself and on the AIO. Then we have HiveOS plugged in, Ethernet plugged in, actual PSU plugged in. I think we're good to go. There's really nothing else we need to power on this board. So the only thing we don't have is a power switch on it. For right now, I'm just going to jump the 2 pins together. So let's turn this on and make sure she fires up. Okay, board has power. So now we're going to jump these 2 pins right here. And she's working. I'm excited. That's awesome. My official first CPU mining rig. So obviously I'm going to clean up all the cables. The only thing that stinks about these power supplies is the fact that you can't do anything with the extra cables that you're not using, unfortunately, but hey, it is what it is. Oh, I'm super pumped. All right, so now what we have to do is get into HiveOS, and I need to figure out how to make this thing mine because I have never CPU mined on HiveOS, ever. Let's do it. All right, so getting into HiveOS didn't quite work out because I needed a GPU to be able to get this thing to boot. Since we changed the CPU and the RAM, this thing was automatically going directly into BIOS. So I had to remove a GPU from that rig for the time being just so it could, you know, register on my screen because AMD does not have onboard graphics apparently. Mr. Matt Electron Engineering told me a few things we needed to change. So I added 3600 megahertz RAM, so we had to change that setting from where it was like 24 or something. Then scroll down, we're gonna go to Precision Boost Overdrive and we're gonna disable that. Then we're gonna go back and the CPU core voltage, we're gonna change that to 1. So basically you put it on manual mode, you click here and then you just press 1 on your keyboard. The CPU socket you leave alone, but he said the DRAM, you want to change it to 1.35 and then hit enter. So that's what we did. Now all I have to do is basically save and exit and this should get into HiveOS. Save changes and reset. Now that we just restarted, if this boots right up into HiveOS like it is, I'm going to have to shut it down. I want to get that GPU out, put it back in there, and then fire this up with no GPU. Alright, so she's all back up and running. We have this rig all back together, and we can now see the Rogue Strix B450 Gaming and the AMD Ryzen 9 12-core 24X AMD. So I need to add my wallet to this farm. Alright, so check it out. She is up and running. Well, kind of. So right now, we had to put in, if you look right here, we put in a command that says tune full. So right now, this is actually tuning each thread on the CPU to get the maximum performance on top of the stuff we just did in the BIOS of the actual computer itself. So once this thing is complete, I guess it takes about 2 hours. Real quick, I'll show you guys the flight sheet. So right there, obviously you have RTM is the coin. Then I just put RTM desktop wallet with my wallet address because I had to add it prior to this. You want to do rplant for the pool. Then you want to go to CPU miner -opt. Go to miner config. You're going to go to GR Ghost Riders RTM. Then as you can see, it just says wall and worker names, then URL. In the config override, put the tune full and then true, exactly like it is there. Put GR in the miner fork, the latest version, and password doesn't really matter right this second. And apply the changes. Obviously, I already have it doing it, so I don't need to. And then, yeah, that's really it, guys. The thing starts mining. So you don't actually overclock CPUs inside HiveOS. You overclock them in the BIOS like we did just before we fired this back up. That's why we needed the GPU. So if you guys have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. But you're definitely better off going to Misfit Mining Discord and asking our man, Matt Electron, for further pointers. But guys, I hope you appreciate this content. I hope you enjoyed the build. This CPU water block is actually a little overkill for CPU mining. You really don't need it if you're going to be undervolting all that stuff inside the BIOS. I learned that tonight talking to Matt Electron, so is what it is. At least the water blocks look kind of cool, and you know what, I didn't spend too much money on them, so not a huge loss. So I appreciate you all for watching. Please stay safe, and I'll see you guys real soon. Peace.